in a teeny tiny cottage on the edge of the wild countryside in northern Scotland, there lived a lovely old lady called Nana. She had thick, wiry grey hair that she wore in a braid that reached halfway down her back. Her eyes were warm and brown, like coffee, and her smile was soft and sweet. She always wore a woolly cardigan made from patches of knobby-by-bobbly knitting. Each patch had a different multicoloured pattern woven into it, and some of them had pom-poms and tassels. Nana knitted this cardigan herself, and she was careful to give it wide, deep pockets so that she could keep storybooks and boiled sweets inside them. Nana's cottage was as colourful as she was. It was small and square with only 4 rooms, a kitchen, a living room, a bathroom, and a bedroom. The outside of the house was painted sky blue, but the inside was painted deep yellow and gold. Nana's favourite room was the living room. The floor was made from flagstones and lined with thick, colourful rocks. In the centre of the back wall, there was an old stone fireplace with a brass fire grate for burning dry wood. The walls inside the fireplace were black with soot from all the years of use, because every night in the winter, Nana would light a fire and sit with her grandchildren and tell them stories about why the world is as it is. One night, Nana sat with her grandchildren, Rose and Benji. She looked at Rose's shiny copper-coloured hair and Benji's bright, mischievous smile. They were holding cups of warm cocoa in their little hands. The steam from each cup was curling and twisting into the air. Rose poked at the little marshmallows bobbing on the surface of hers. Nana smiled. It was story time. She cleared her throat, and the children turned to her excited. She smiled her special twinkling smile, and she reached into the pocket of her cardigan to bring out her favourite storybook. It was one she had written herself. She turned to an earmarked page and told the children that tonight they would learn how sheep came to be. Rose and Benji got themselves comfortable. They wriggled into the squashy seats of their armchairs and cupped the cocoa against their chests with a relaxed sigh. When they were ready, Nana smiled again and she started her story. Long ago, when the earth had just learned to turn, there were no such things as countries. The land had not yet been broken up by the sea, and so nobody tried to claim it as their own. It was a magical time when people could talk with everything around them and remembered that all things were as one. Up in the northern hemisphere, there lived a tribe of creatures. They were small and hooed like goats. They had gentle, long faces and thin, knobby-by knees. Their coats were coloured white, cream, and sometimes speckled brown. Their hair was short and smooth like a dog. They were peaceful and gentle, but they didn't always know how to handle their struggles in life. One day, the creatures were walking to their summer feeding grounds, and they came across a great river that was flowing very fast. On the other side were lush green fields that were perfect for the creatures to graze in. The creatures looked longingly at the fields and tried to think of a way to cross the river. But there was no way to safely get to the other side. But then a magnificent man arrived. He rode a chestnut-brown horse, and even though he was old, he was tall and powerful. His long silver hair fell to his shoulders, and his skin seemed to glow like a diamond. As soon as he saw the creatures, he felt sorry for them. They were hungry and stuck on the wrong side of the river with no idea what to do. He walked over to them and greeted them kindly. The creatures looked around, happy to hear his smooth, deep voice. They greeted him back. The man told them that he could help them cross the river, but the creatures shook their heads. They couldn't ask him to carry them one by one across the water. The man laughed. He opened up his traveling cape to show them his outfit, which glittered gold and bronze. The creatures were in awe. This was the great king of the north, and he had magical powers. They bowed their heads in respect, and the great king chuckled. He dismounted his horse, walked over to the riverbed, and let his feet touch the cool water. He breathed in a deep, peaceful breath as the water ran in between his toes and danced around his ankles. With one swift, graceful movement, he bent down and plucked 5 stones from the riverbed. They were round and smooth in his hand, eroded and shaped by the endless flow of the river water. The creatures watched him, curiously, their eyes wide and their breathing soft. Then the king held the stones to his forehead. He closed his eyes and told them that he wished for the creatures to cross the river. The stones quivered in his hand. Then he cast them into the river just like a farmer throws seeds to the soil. As soon as the stones touched the water, they swelled in size until they were no longer the size of pebbles, but the size of mountain boulders. As the boulders bloomed into being, they found a way to line up across the width of the river, just like a bridge of stepping stones. The king smiled and turned to the creatures. The creatures were amazed. They bleated happily and wagged their stumpy tails. Full of joy, they began to cross the river, jumping from one stone to the next, their hooves clacking with each jump. But the queen of the creatures stayed behind. She looked at the king with her round, innocent eyes and told him how grateful she was for his help. The king waved his hand. It was no bother at all, but the queen was a good queen and full of good manners. She sank onto one knee and told the king that she wanted to help him and his people in return. The king looked at her curiously. He breathed in the fresh country air. Then he told her to come to his kingdom in the north. Perhaps there would be some use for her there. With that, he turned and climbed back onto his horse and rode off into the distance. The queen was a creature of her word. The very next day, she set out for the kingdom of the north. She walked alone and made sure that no one would follow her. The journey took many weeks. She wandered over great plains and fields. She trudged through muddy waters and boggy ground. She tiptoed through ancient forests and mossy woods. And all the time she headed north. But the further she walked, the colder it got. She could feel the air changing with each step. Wind whipped over the plains, bringing with it a biting cold. It whistled over the muddy waters and through the forests, and in the morning she would see how it had shaped the frost. Her breath started to form in clouds at night, and her hooves started to harden against the ground. But she kept walking. Slowly she realized that her coat was beginning to change. She didn't know how, but it was becoming thicker and thicker. Her once smooth short hairs were now long and curly. The more her coat grew, the less she felt the cold. In fact, she was almost too warm. But the coat didn't seem to stop growing. One night she caught sight of herself in the reflection of the lake. She gasped in the cold night air. Then she giggled and giggled. She looked just like a fluffy white cloud with 4 spindly legs. But still she kept going. Then finally, one morning, just as she felt she would run out of land to walk on, she reached the kingdom in the north. It was a curious kingdom. It reached out right into the sky, and it was difficult to tell where the buildings ended and the clouds began. But she walked inside and clip-clopped her way to a great hall that stood in the middle of the kingdom. Inside the hall, there was a huge 4-poster bed made out of pearls and shells. Lying in the bed was the old king, but he was no longer glowing like a diamond. He seemed weak and tired. The queen of the creatures rushed over to him and asked what was wrong. He looked at her and told her that he had become too cold and couldn't warm up. The queen smiled, relieved. She looked at the king and she told him if he could take it off her, he could have her coat. She was too warm in it now. The king nodded. He held out his hand and touched the queen's coat. Immediately it fell off of her in one piece. She wriggled in delight. It felt so good to be cool again. Then she picked up her coat from the floor and placed it over the king like a blanket. Instantly, warmth spread over him. Colour flooded his face and his diamond glow came back. He smiled at the queen and told her what a lovely woolly coat it was. The queen smiled too. She was happy to have helped. The king explained to her that in the north there was magic all around. The queen was surprised, but the king kept talking. He told her that because of her journey, the coat she had grown would continue to grow. She would need to give it away every few months. And because she was the queen, her people would also have long coats too. The king of the north asked the queen what her people were called. She told him that they didn't have a name. They were just wanderers. He thought for a while, and then he told her that they would call her people sheep and sheep. And the people of the north would forever be friends. The people would look after the sheep, just like the old king had. In return, the sheep would give them their coats. The queen thought that sounded fair, and she bleated happily. It was so wonderful to have a name and a purpose, and to know her people would be looked after just as they looked after others. She thought about it as she walked all the way back home. When she got there, she saw that her people now also had thick woolly coats. So she told them about her time with the king of the north. Everyone was excited. They stamped their hooves and jumped and celebrated all day and all night until finally they couldn't dance anymore. And so they slept sweetly and soundly with peace in their hearts. And that is how sheep came to be. Nana closed the storybook with a soft thud. The fire was crackling merrily, casting a warm glow onto the room. But Rose and Benji were fast asleep, curled up in their armchairs with their eyes closed and their breathing soft. Nana smiled a warm smile. She took their cocoa cups to the kitchen and pulled out her old camp bed from the cupboard, setting it up by the fire. She placed her soft, squashy pillows on the bed and brought out a pile of warm, woolly blankets. Then, one by one, she carried Rose and Benji to the bed and laid them down, making sure their heads were resting on the pillows. She took out her biggest, softest, woolliest blanket and threw it over the children, tucking the covers underneath them. Then she walked over to her sofa, plumped up her cushions, and lay down on top. The firelight danced and fluttered. Nana looked around her living room. She breathed in a sweet, satisfying breath and felt her arms and legs relax. She looked at Rose and Benji, and her heart seemed to glow warm and bright. She felt the wool of the blanket on her skin and thought of the sheep that had given their coats. She smiled gratefully. Then slowly, she let her eyelids close and ever so gently she was carried off into dreams, studded with diamonds and pearls. And the clip-clopping sound of the hooves of sheep keep doing it.